This is Room 301, a podcast ran by digital agency group The Digital Maze. Room 301 is a podcast all about SEO, PPC, website design, social media, and everything in between. Our aim with this is to equip marketing leaders with all the know-how to run and lead an effective digital strategy. My name is Rob. Let's get into it. So today we have a returning guest. We have Mr. James Walsh. Hello, James.
Hello, Rob.
How are you doing? You good?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
So before we get kick-started, quick intro. I know you've done it once before, but go again.
Yeah. So I'm James Walsh. I'm head of web design, so that's everything UI and UX at the Digital Maze. But I'm also a brand enthusiast, and I've been heavily involved in lots of branding projects in the past.
Perfect. So today is quite a special episode because we have, just rebranded.
Yeah, indeed.
Which is very exciting. And James spearheaded that with one of our colleagues who's named Pete. Although Pete's not on the podcast, we only had two mics, so we've got James today. But I wanted to talk about that and go through that. And this episode is all about rebranding in the context of rebranding ourselves, a digital agency. So I'm going to jump into a bit of a Q&A, if that's okay, James.
Works for me.
In the first one, not really a question, but we used a certain process for our rebranding, and I was just hoping you could sort of glide over that for the benefit of the listeners. It was a very in-depth process, one that was very, very new to me. So I think it'd be interesting just to glide over that for the listeners, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody out there who's been through a rebrand, there are varying levels of intensity around that. Some people may have just sat in a room and thought, oh, that's a nice colour, that's a nice logo, let's make something that we like or how it looks. But we wanted to do more than that, and we thought we really need to peel back the layers and figure out who TDM actually are. So we went through a process of discovering what's called our brand archetype, and this is where you sort of attribute personality to a brand. And there's quite a lot of these archetypes. They're based on some philosophy from Carl Jung. They're absolutely everywhere in life, in movies and books and TV, but you can attribute them to anything with character, essentially. So we took some time, a core brand team got together, did some research, started asking questions of ourselves, the business, of Rob as well, and Liam as well, and sort of got to the core of that. So we went through presentations, questionnaires, trial and error stuff, all this kind of thing, and eventually got to a core archetype of being a magician, which is a much longer story, but that was the beginning of the process. So once we'd done that, we knew who we were. We had an idea of what we stood for, what we represented. To put the magician in a nutshell, it's a character that believes in metamorphosis, is that right? Anyway, well, whatever. It believes in change, transformation, of sort of like a more mystical, magical
type. It's an easier word to say, change.
Yes.
Just say change.
Yeah. I don't think metamorphosis is in the Yorkshire dialect. We'll just have to deal with that. So yeah, our process was to go through that, discover all of that about ourselves, and only after that could we start looking at visuals and how we should be represented, how we should sound. So it's actually quite a long process, but it's a lot more rewarding, and I think the faith that people have in the brand at the other end is a lot deeper. So I'm glad we did it, and I think it's the correct and right way to go about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think I'm guilty sometimes of wanting to jump into a project and have it done. 3 or 4 weeks later, I've got lots of work on. I like to just shoot for it as quickly as possible. But I'm glad that James and Pete sort of sat me down and sat Liam down as well and said, look, we can do that, but it's not going to be quite as good as doing it in a more in-depth way. So in your words, what are the pros and cons of doing a longer, more in-depth process versus maybe less in-depth, slightly quicker, which I know we do on occasions because budget restrictions and stuff like that.
I'm a bad news first kind of guy, so we'll go with the cons first. So I think you touched on budget. Not everyone can afford to spend the amount of time we spent doing that, and sometimes you're in a fast-moving environment, you need to get into the marketplace, you need to compete. And you can condense this, you can do smaller versions, you can just go ahead and go, right, we just need some sort of design. And in all honesty, that's what we did. We merged together and we started this company. It was we need something. So we made something, and then we went back and replaced it later. The cons of the long process, other than that, are that it's harder to get everyone on board. It's harder to coordinate. It takes a lot more planning. There's a lot more resource goes into that. It's not just brief a designer and wait and see what they give you. But the pros of that are that, as I've already alluded to, there's a lot more faith in it. So the people who are involved are much more on board. They're bought in, and it feels like a project that multiple people have brought to the fore. So it's not just the designers have designed a logo, they've come up with something and they think that's best for everybody. The people involved have buy-in and they have agency in it. And at the end of the day, that's what a lot of branding's about. You're trying to put a flag on a building or an office of people or a warehouse, whatever your business is, that everyone can rally behind. And the more people who are into that, the more successful that's going to be in the long term. So yeah, I think broadly those are the pros and cons. I mean, we could get into the nitty gritty of it, but I think that's the reason you would do it over not doing it.
No, I have to agree. I think I love the new brand, and I think everybody certainly internally loves it, and I'm sure everyone will externally as well when it sort of gets spread a bit further. And I think
that's the hope.
That process has helped us with that buy-in. And not just look at it from a visual standpoint either. We've looked at everything from tone of voice to, the visual side of it as well, but what does it mean, tone of voice? That's then informed the content on the website, and it all feels like it's us now rather than this person doing that, logo doing that, and, being disjointed. And I've been in that situation before when we haven't gone through that in-depth process. So it does feel very joined up. It feels like we've got something now that we can go out to market with next year and really make a mark with. You touched on it there, James. We needed a rebrand because, for anybody who doesn't know the history of our company, it was basically formed off the back of acquisitions and the merging of 3 companies. So we needed to form an identity that we could all see as one. And that was done very quickly. At the time, it was sort of as James said in James's words, we needed something. So the reason we needed a rebrand was because we had something. It didn't have any time really put into it. Well, not a huge amount anyway. And we wanted something to make a splash and go to market with. So that was the reason why we branded. But for any other business owners or marketing directors or anybody involved in owning a brand in some way, shape or form, what do you think are the triggers to potentially look at or require a rebrand?
Strange one, because it's going to depend on your level of sort of connection to your own brand. If you're thinking about it every day, if you've got brand managers inside your business, you're just going to feel it. You're going to know when things are getting tired, when the logo above the door doesn't represent the company that works there anymore. Those sorts of esoteric triggers are probably the most obvious. But from a more practical point of view, I think you can look around at the marketplace around you, and if the products that are being offered in that sector, or that you're offering to people, the services that you're offering to people, if they're starting to change, if that customer base is starting to change, I think that's a really good time to do that, because what you have now will be talking to maybe your existing customer base, maybe the people you had around when you started, but those new customers, those new contacts that are out there might be looking for something different. And I think when you start feeling that people aren't reacting to you in the same way, as a company, that is, not you yourself, then that's probably the best time. That's the time to start thinking about it and start putting the groundwork in, because the worst time to do it is when it's too late. So you'll get this sort of element of, if you just sit around and go, we're fine, we don't need to do this. One day you'll look around and all of your competitors have got really slick marketing, really slick branding, and you're sat there with your tail between your legs going, whoops, we missed that window. And then you'll end up in that scenario that we discussed earlier, where you'll need to hurry it. And hurrying it will just get you into a loop where in a few years you'll have to do it again because it was never really considered, never really thought through. So yeah, it's a lot about feel, but there are definitely external things that you can look to that will tell you it's time. And I think those are the things to look out for if you've not got that.
I think for us, the end customer was quite a big catalyst for us. We brought together 3 actually, really strong sort of regional Midlands-based agencies who primarily dealt with SMEs or small corporates, and we're in this interesting place at the moment where we're sort of moving from still working with SMEs and small corporates, but our aspiration is to move up that chain and work with potentially larger companies with larger budgets, and we feel we've got the skill sets to be able to do that. And we didn't feel the brands we had in place were ready for that. So that was actually a big catalyst for as to why we wanted to rebrand. And some of the decisions we made along the way that James and Pete took myself and Liam through and the wider team were based on, well, who is it we're targeting now? Who are we speaking to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who are we trying to resonate with? So who should be involved in that rebranding process?
So I think this one sort of depends on the scale of your business. So I've been involved. A weird little curio about me is that every company I've worked at full time, I've been involved in rebranding. So the first,
it's not just you waving a flag saying, "Can we rebrand?"
Maybe I'm the problem. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the first one was for a sort of a reasonably larger organisation, and they brought in an external brand consultancy and agency, and they recognised early on that it was quite a personal sort of business that a lot of people had a lot of ties to. So they tried to bring everybody on board to some degree, but they used a core brand team, and so those were mixed up of core stakeholders. So the people at the top and the people pulling the purse strings, certain professionals within the business who would have something to offer to the process. And I think those are the people you're looking at, in really small businesses, like 10 to 15 people. And I think you can keep everyone informed of every beat along the path, because you've almost got the time and the space there to bring everybody on that journey with you and get total buy-in from the off. To use our own example, we were a bit bigger than any of the agencies were when we merged. So you couldn't really say, let's bring everybody in. But we brought, as professionals became relevant to the process, we brought them in. And I think our brand team probably ended with about somewhere around 10 people who knew of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And then that meant that, we had people in different parts of the business who were bought in. And I think that really helps. But, if you just want to know the nuts and bolts of who to get involved, you're going to need a designer. You're probably going to need somebody who understands writing, understands tone of voice. You're going to need people who understand the business from top to bottom. So you're going to need CEOs, you're going to need directors, that kind of people. But that'll sort of form that team, because all of those people can effectively check each other. The designer's not just going to run off with wild ideas if you've got the FD in the room, that kind of thing, or you've got your CEO. And then you've got writers and content people who are going to be able to say, okay, that's nice, that looks lovely, but how does it actually work? How does it sound? How should it read? That kind of thing. But yeah, that's kind of the people I think you should form a team with.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anybody who could have an opinion as well, I think, is quite important.
That's the other sort of dangerous thing, is if you do bring everybody on board for every single piece, you end up in a too many cooks scenario. And I think it's harsh, because you are branding a company that people work for, and you do want them all to enjoy it, to like it, to rally behind it, but you have to recognise where people's sort of professions lie and people's experience lies. So you've got to go out there and at certain touch points and check people are cool with it, but you also don't want to just invite every single opinion in the building on board, or you'll be there forever.
Sounds good. So we spoke about potential target customers, demographics. One thing that we identified was, looking at marketing directors and CMOs who are likely to have the luxury of having maybe a small internal team, and we can plug a gap in within that. And that led us to believe that those are the sorts of companies that would have the sort of size of marketing budgets that we'd like to be working with. How did you link that to the design and the brand in the end, and how do you do that generally for other companies?
So I think you've got to look at what is that demographic looking to do, not just what are they looking to purchase from you, what are they looking to do. So in our case, obviously the raw element of it is they need marketing assistants, they need professionals to come in, do the things they can't do and achieve an objective, a goal. But the more sort of broad spectrum of that is that they're looking for somebody to take them from point A to point B. So they're looking for change. They need to pick up from a position they're in that they don't understand why they're in it. They'll be looking around at their own company going, but we do what we do really well. Why aren't we getting numbers on our website? Why aren't we getting conversions? Why aren't people buying from us? And they need that help to get to point B, which is right. Now we know that, and we've put all these other things in place. And so, to use our example, that journey that happens between A and B is not always obvious to them. Like, they've hired us because they don't understand the process. So you need it to be something that doesn't scare them. Like, you can't just come in and go, oh, here's a load of gobbledygook, here's a load of jargon, and that's why. Whereas we want to come in and go, look, we got this, we know this, you're in good hands, we're going to take you from A to B, and B is going to be wonderful. And so our whole point of the magician was that we're going to do that journey, that process, with sort of knowledge of how things work. So that's why it's a magician and not a wizard. And we're going to take them on that sort of transformational journey. So in the end, we're selling them transformation. We're not necessarily just selling them the nuts and bolts of marketing. And I think that's the thing. Like, you're selling your business's personality and the way you're going to achieve the same thing everyone else in your space is trying to sell.
Yeah.
Because if all you do is say, we can do SEO or we can do CRO, everyone else is saying that. Like, everyone else out there is saying, we can provide this service. So what's the differentiator? It's how you do it. So that's the important thing to lean into. And I think when we talk about these bigger brands, these bigger companies, they're looking for someone who can impress. They're not just looking to get the core thing done and that's fine. They're looking for somebody who can go, this experience is going to be great, and it's going to change not just your results, but how your company looks at marketing, looks at these things. So it's all about that. And that's why the archetypes thing is really important, because that helps you realize who you are and how you do things. So you can then lean into that and go, okay, well, what services do we sell? Okay, we say you're a car mechanics or something. You can lean into that and go, well, maybe we've got like a caregiver archetype. So when you're selling repair or you're selling like service to cars, you can lean into how that helps people, how that improves their life, like how that makes their life easier if their car's running well, that kind of thing. It sounds daft, it sounds really basic, but the amount of companies and businesses that don't think about that don't do that, they just put up a sign that'll just say service X, price Y, logo, done. That's the differentiator. That's what steps you beyond that.
And that's the risk in our space, isn't it?
Yeah,
we are
massively.
we're a digital agency. We offer SEO, PPC, web development, but so does, even within 10 miles, probably 50 other companies. And the risk is somebody's going to look for that service and they're going to get 5 other agencies saying, we can do that, yes. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. Whereas we're going down a different route where we want to help transform, change.
Yeah, that's almost like the bare minimum, isn't it? It's like, we can do that. Well, of course you can.
Exactly.
If you couldn't, what are you doing?
100%.
So,
and we're not biased. We're not going to be biased if they ask for SEO, but we don't fully believe that SEO, for example, is the service going to benefit them most. We don't have to be biased to that because we've got skill sets in different areas. And actually, if you've seen our new brand, and hopefully at this point you've checked it out, and if you haven't, please do so. There are some subtle nods.
Forward all complaints to Rob 12.
Yeah, there is some subtle nods to transformation and change. So one of the ideas was something called portals, which is the idea of before the portal, you're at point A, go through the portal, magical stuff happens. You end up on the other side with the change that you designed from the outset. So there is some subtle nods to that. It's not just, like I say, there's not just words spilling out of James's mouth and actually no substance to it. It really is. It really has gone into certainly the visual identity and the identity of us as a business now. So for anybody who's listened to previous episodes of our podcast, you'll know that James was a starring role on episode 2, I think it was. But we talked about the psychology behind design, and at the time the emphasis was more on user interfaces, user experience, and stuff like that. Question is, does psychology play a role in rebranding at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so last time we were talking about UI and UX, as user experience, and so you're looking at the psychology of the user, whereas in this sense, the psychology comes in from the start. We were talking earlier on about these Jungian archetypes, and that's the work of Carl Jung, a psychiatrist, a psychologist. And so we got to the psychology of ourselves first, figured out who we are as a business, and that then helps you set this atmosphere, this feeling for the visuals, for the website, for all the stuff that goes out there, probably for the key art for this podcast. So what we wanted to do with that is we wanted to go, okay, well, we're this sort of magician archetype. And the worry of that is that you go, okay, well, magicians, that's Gandalf, right? That's, Paul Daniels, that's wands, that's dragons, that's all this stuff. But it doesn't really mean that so much. It's just somebody or something who uses a power. That power can be knowledge, it could be information, it could be creativity, it could be anything like that, to transform something from where it was to where it is now. And where it is now is always usually sort of magical and better and fantastic. So we want to show that beneficial journey, that voyage from A to B, which we discussed earlier. So a lot of our visual devices are about points of change. So we have a sort of portal, and the idea of the portal is that you go into a portal not quite knowing what you're doing, but you come out the other side totally in a totally different space. So that's the sort of major one that we've got. But we've also got these sort of concentric ring wormholes, and they're sort of trying to show that journey. So almost if you were to step through a portal, like a wormhole in space, that you're actually moving through some big point of change. So we're trying to use those, but they're not really sort of photorealistically like that. They're very much flat shapes, concentric, and they go from our one core color to our other core color, which is pinks and purples, which was a hard sell, by the way, but I think it was worth it.
Big fan. Man.
Yeah. There's some copies floating around somewhere in an XD file in about 20 other color schemes that all look rubbish. But yeah, so that psychology led us to setting that atmosphere, to having that tone, and knowing how it should look and how it should feel. And the idea is that when people get there, they start thinking about possibilities. There aren't many agency websites out there that are going to hit you with pink and purple and feel a little bit sparkly and a little bit magical. It's just that taste of something different. And hopefully, we're gonna inspire people to think, oh, we could do something like that. Why can't we be more adventurous? Why can't we be more brave in our space? And I think that's the ideal, really. And hopefully we start getting leads from clients who are more adventurous, who are more eager to leap a little bit into the unknown and try something new and try breaking changes to get to where they need to be. Yeah, it's definitely comes to that psychology.
Working with ambitious companies is something we're really keen on doing. So yeah, it all links. Like I say, it's not just words out of James's mouth. It's very much come to fruition. Cool. So brand's launched. There was 2 launches in my mind for this. There was an external launch, which is ongoing, and great feedback so far. But there was an internal launch. Do you think, how would you go about launching a brand internally?
Okay, so alluded earlier to sort of the scales of brand teams. I think if you're a small company, that's kind of just going to happen as it goes, because you're going to want to keep everyone in the loop. If you're 15 people or less, they're just going to know. If you're getting above that, you're getting into the 40s, the 50s, the 100s. You need a plan. You need to think about, okay, well, we've gone away as a brand team and we've come up with this and we love it. We're all on board. But, a lot of people will have loyalty to some sort of loyalty to your existing visual, because the people who've worked for you for a long time are gonna have attachment to that, whether they know it or not. And so if you suddenly pull it away and remove it, any change can be difficult, can be damaging. So I think one of the core things you've got to do is you've got to be honest, and you've got to be transparent about the process you went through. So you've almost got to present to people and bring people along on a sort of miniaturized, maybe slightly romanticized version of the process you went through, to sort of tell a story of it. But then they can see how the sausage is made. They're getting a look at what you did, how you got there, and that you didn't just swing in and go, we want it to look like this because we think it looks cool. And that's like the worst impression you can give. So the impression you want to give is that not impression, the truth you want to tell is that you've sat down, done the research, thought about the whole business, including those people, and where it should go. And if you tell that story to people, honestly and truthfully, then even if they don't initially like the end visual and the end concept, they're going to empathize and they're going to get it. They're going to understand how you've got there, and that's going to set them up to start that journey of sort of brand loyalty again. So if you've still torn away the old thing, but over time, you want them to love the new thing. Some people are going to love it out of the gate, but those other people who might not, you want them to like start from a position where they're at least entertaining that idea. So you have to be honest. You have to be truthful. You can't just come in and say, right, this is it. Get on board, sling your hook. You've got to give people a little bit of humanity in that process, and a little bit of a story and a little bit of a tale. And I think that's. And if you don't have a tale to tell, then you probably didn't rebrand properly. So, I think that's where I'm at with that. And having done that quite recently, I really enjoyed that process, and I really enjoyed revealing our sort of brand story to people. And people afterwards spoke to me and said that, that was really interesting, and that's not how I thought that would have gone. Yeah. And I expect that people thought it would have just been pull back the curtain. Here's a thing. Good night. This is you now.
Yeah, I mean, we for anybody that doesn't know, we took the entire business out to a place in Nottingham called the Canal House.
Free drinks help.
Free bit of breakfast, all that kind of stuff certainly helps. But James and Pete presented it, and it wasn't, like I say, it wasn't a grand reveal, although it was. But actually, the emphasis of that presentation was all about the process and how myself and Liam and different stakeholders fed into that, how different members of the team fed into that. So we, as James said earlier on in the podcast, it started off with actually 4 of us, so myself, Liam, James and Pete, and then 4 became 5 became 6, and we landed on about 10 people. So it told that story, and it told that journey, and it showed how it transitioned from point A to point B, and we changed ourselves, and it's all very exciting. So we've done it now. We're sort of there. We're all very pleased. I didn't really see any risk with our rebrand, purely because I think what we had previously was done so quickly, and I think everyone was aware of that. I don't think anybody really had a massive amount of attachment to the last brand. So
the bigger risk for us would have been to not do it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I didn't really personally see any risk with that, because there wasn't that attachment. We hadn't gone through a process like this. So it was easy. It was an easier change to make. But I know in some businesses, like you said, there is that attachment. It's, a brand that's gone through a process. There's reasons why that brand was that brand. So it's not quite as straightforward as that. So what do you feel are the risks to a rebrand?
So I think the bigger risks lie in I mean, we're quite lucky because I think the bigger risks lie in sectors that are a bit different to ours. So a lot of our business is based on acquiring new business. So the touch point to a customer for us happens once, really, and then once they know what we can do, they kind of probably stop caring about our branding and what we look like.
That's right, yeah.
But if you're a commercial business or sort of a B2C business, there's probably where the bigger risks are, because you've got people who have a built-up mental image of your brand and what that is and that character of it and what it represents. So those companies really need to think about what they're doing and take their time, and the launch of that kind of thing is vital. There's some examples of that going disastrously wrong. Like I think when Gap rebranded, Royal Mail tried it with one of their services, and the sort of out of nowhere rebrand that just hits people with, we're totally different now, good luck. And everybody just reacts negatively because it's change they didn't ask for, didn't expect and didn't need. Whereas one of the great examples I like to look at was somebody who did it really right, really, really right. So when, I can't remember who bought who, but essentially Orange and T-Mobile merged in the UK, at least a long time ago. And that was
the start of EE, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was like 2 huge brands, and everyone knew Orange. I mean, their whole ad campaigns, everyone knew T-Mobile, and you've got this thing, and you sat and you're looking at these 2 big brands, and you've just brought them together. You brought them under one roof, and the people in that boardroom own that power. They own what we call that brand equity, and they could have easily chosen to go, okay, well, let's just run both and try and do cross promotions and stuff in tandem, and we'll be fine. But they made a really bold decision to throw those brands out of the window and start something new. But they didn't just do it overnight. And you can go out there and you can sort of Google it, and there's a lot of visual campaigns where they were informing the customer base that this was happening. It's becoming EE. And rather than just pull back the curtain out of nowhere, they start to build excitement, start to build anticipation about this new thing. So if you've got any touch points with your customers, if you're a bricks and mortar store and they come in there, you can start laying the seeds that change is coming in that store. You could start doing it on your ads. You could start doing it on your email newsletters, and just soften people up for change. Let them know that it's coming. If you play your cards right, the ideal scenario is that people are at best excited and at worst indifferent to your change. Because if you don't, they're just going to hate it. People like in large groups, naturally, people are change resistant. So it's a big task to do. Like I said, we're quite lucky that we're largely in a B2B world, and we're dealing with businesses who understand business change. So we don't have as many risks. But there will be people out there listening to this who are thinking, I want to change the sign above my shop. I want to change all my livery. And you can do that, but you've got to be aware of the customers who come back to you every now and again, day to day. How are they going to feel? How are they going to think? They're almost part of your organization at that point, and they need to go on that sort of buy-in journey that we've been talking about. It can't just be the people who work for you. So that the biggest risk is definitely in B2C, and that's where you need professionals involved to make sure that happens. You need people who know how to launch campaigns, who know how to launch something.
Say brand and marketing working together. Yeah, that's a whole
exactly
different podcast,
that,
isn't it?
Like, because you could go in, you could hire a great branding agency, you could hire great designers to come up with amazing new brand concepts, and it could look amazing, it could be fantastic, everybody could be really into it. But then you could just launch it to the world, and they go, "What? Who's that? I didn't used to go to this business. I go to this other business." If you're changing your name, but even if just the logo and the visual changes, that could be enough for someone to think that's not where I shop. So the dangers are in lack of knowledge and lack of storytelling, essentially, is where the real dangers are. Of course, you could also just get it disastrously wrong and make a really bad logo, a really bad thing that just doesn't speak to the audience at all. But I'd like to think we're not dealing with people who are going to do that, but it can happen.
Lastly, favourite part of the TDM brand?
Portals.
Yeah, big fan of portals myself.
Yeah, love it. I just think it's a really nice way to show the transition, but it's just visually, I think it looks really sumptuous. I just like how you've got I'm going to get a bit design nerd for a minute here, but the portals are built up of, I think it's 7 rings of colour that gradually change from each other, and there's almost this optical illusion of gradient within that just isn't actually there, but it's sort of a design that's more than the sum of its parts. So it's a thing that is literally just a series of circles, and we have them at a certain angle and all this kind of stuff. So you're not trying to undersell it too much. But when you look at it, it adds more to the image than is actually there. There's almost some optical illusion going on in it. And I think that is part of the magic part of what we do. And I really like that. I could talk all day about that, so I won't. But
yeah, no, I have to agree. I think, the portals. I really like the colour. Started off with a bit, not sure what it is, but when you explain it like, it's bold, it's a brave move we've made there, and I think that will help us in the long run. But no, thank you for joining us, James.
No worries, it's been a pleasure.
Very, very grateful for the work you've done on the rebrand, likewise with Pete, and then obviously everyone else who came on board to help with this project. The project's been around, I want to say 4 or 5 months at this point. Obviously, we've got client work to do in that time and stuff as well, but it's been a nice journey. It's been a good journey to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting to see the different steps to that process, and also, obviously, I'm a commercial guy. I'm thinking, well, this is great for potential clients coming in for our doors as well. We can take on this journey ourselves. So, no, it's been great, and I'm really looking forward to 2023 and how the new brand can help us go from strength to strength.
Yeah, for sure. So, before we sign off, I do want to give a big tip of the hat to Pete, who isn't on this podcast. Actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The sort of early doors, a lot of the thought into psychology and looking at brand archetypes, a lot of that was led by Pete and his enthusiasm for that. Just due to time constraints, he hasn't really been able to be as involved in a lot of the later parts of the process. But without Pete, I don't think we'd be at the point we're at now. No. So I think it's just a big nod of that to Pete Bingham.
Yeah, 100%, and likewise with Claire, Rebecca. With the
absolutely. The tone of voice people, I can make a pretty picture, I can do that, but to take the idea of change and transformation and that kind of mystical voyage of discovery, to take that and make that make sense in a world of real marketing copy of stuff that isn't just fancy words written on a page, but is actually selling a product and a service. But to make that have that character, that's a special skill. I can't do that. So without those guys, we just wouldn't be in the same with that same position of feel that we have. Like when you look at the site and go, that's impressive, and you start reading it, and it would be the stuff we talked about earlier. It'd just be the same old. Whereas with that, with them on board, it's not that at all. It's all part and parcel of the whole thing.
100%. I don't want to leave anyone out now. Oakley, well done for the website, mate. Honestly,
absolutely smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. It's nice to create a visual for a website and know that the team that we've got can take that and just one-to-one it and just deliver a living, breathing website that's a reflection of everything we put down in the design. That is such a good feeling.
Yeah, and it was just, from my perspective, already great to see all the different departments in the business working together on one project and do it so successfully as well. So thank you to everybody involved, and thank you all for listening. Like I say, if you haven't seen the rebrand, please feel free to do so. The best place to look probably is our website, which is thedigitalmaze.com, and we'll see you all again soon.